Good evening. Since 6:30 p.m., the Board of Education has been in closed session to consider the following: the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the district or legal counsel for the district. I will entertain a motion to come out of closed session.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second are heard. Please call the roll, Mrs. Patton.
Kush.
Aye.
Casey.
Aye.
Fitzgerald.
Aye.
Wanke.
Aye.
Kuzminski.
Aye.
McMillan.
Aye.
Gerke.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. We are in open session. Good evening and welcome to the October 3rd board meeting. Our mission is to educate students to be self-directed learners, collaborative workers, complex thinkers, quality producers, and community contributors. Please call the roll, Mrs. Patton.
Board members present this evening: Kristen Fitzgerald, Christine Gerke, Tony Casey, Charles Cush, Amanda McMillan, Joe Kuzminski, and Donna Wanke.
Okay, we have reached the point in our agenda for the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, we've reached the point in our agenda for good news.
Okay, we have some great news to share. Success members and supporters enjoyed a successful back-to-school picnic filled with fun, food, games, and raffles last Sunday. Success, which stands for Schools Using Coordinated Community Efforts to Strengthen Students, is a family-led organization with the support of District 203 leadership committed to empowering African-American Black students and other students of color and their families to enhance academic performance, foster family, school connectedness, and to ensure that everyone is welcomed, valued, and respected. There's a great turnout at the event. Thank you to the Chinese American Women in Action and Anderson's Bookshop for initiating and hosting a book drive to support our students' education on the history and contributions of Asian Americans. As a result of the overwhelming support from the community, more than 550 books were donated to Naperville 203 and 204 schools. Much appreciated. And then finally this evening, our first dual language Funds of Knowledge event took place last Thursday, September 29th. The event was created to elevate the importance of being bilingual and to empower students to continue their trajectory toward biliteracy. Dr. Marian Friebus-Fleman, Director of Language Acquisition, and Dr. Maribel Guerrero, Dual Language Coordinator, kicked off the event with a bilingual welcome of dual language families and introduced the keynote speaker, Dr. Kim Potowski, Professor of Spanish Linguistics at the University of Illinois, Chicago, who gave an engaging and inspirational presentation using both Spanish and English on the benefits of bilingualism. The event was very well attended and very well received by the dual language community, and that's our good news for this evening.
That is indeed wonderful news. All right, we will head into Part 5, public comment on our agenda. The Board of Education welcomes comments from the public at its meetings. Citizens who wish to address the Board of Education should identify themselves by name. Comments by individuals shall be limited to 3 minutes. If the individual is representing multiple individuals or a group, they shall be allowed to speak for 5 minutes. At the conclusion of the time, Mrs. Patton will designate by saying, "Time." As I call an individual for public comment, I will also designate the next speaker so that they have appropriate time to prepare. In accordance with Board of Education policy, issues raised in public comment will be taken under advisement by the Board of Education, but will not be discussed this evening. Issues raised during public participation may be added to future agendas or addressed by administrative staff. Because the questions raised in public comment address district operational matters, the superintendent, as the spokesperson for the district, is the board's designee to coordinate response to public comment and will apprise the board accordingly. As outlined in Board of Education Policy 2.230, individuals addressing the board should conduct themselves with respect and civility towards others. Individuals are free to express their criticism regarding decisions or policies, but the Board of Education expects that they refrain from personal attacks on our superintendent, Board of Education members, and staff. At this point, I would like to welcome Karen Campbell. Our next speaker will be John Campbell. Good evening and welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. Many of you know me. My name is Karen Campbell. I have 3 children that are about to complete their tenure here at 203, and I can't quite believe that this is my last year as a full-blown parent. I'm speaking to the board tonight about two reasons. One that has come to my attention is that you're considering phasing out Latin. Latin has been a big part of two of my three children's educations. My son, who you will hear from, is dyslexic and has had issues with language, and Latin has helped him so much in his language. My older daughter had a very, very hard time in Spanish in junior high and was recommended for Latin and has taken Latin, and it has done wonderful things. Both of them have done amazing on the English part of their standardized tests for two kids who are very math-centered students. The children are going to need to take languages. Most of the schools that my son is applying for and that my daughter and my other daughter applied for are looking for 4 years of a language. And I think as a world-class school district that's award-winning, we should offer students many options to be able to explore what interests them. And with Latin being such a good STEM, root STEM, and being more of a formulaic, I will let Magistra talk about the details of that, but it makes more sense to the way my kids' brains work. The other thing I wanted to ask your indulgence on, or your help on, is it's been rumored, I've been told that graduation will be May 21st, and it's not on the calendar. And when I asked at the schools, they said it was up to the school board when graduation is. My older daughter will graduate on that same day. And I was hoping that maybe you could make Central, the 4 o'clock, so I could be at both my kids' graduations. Thank you for your time.
On behalf of the whole board, thank you for your comments. Our next speaker will be John Campbell. He will be followed by Nancy Turner. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening. I'm John Campbell. I'm known as Jack Campbell, and I'm here to talk about Latin. As a senior at Naperville Central, I've been a part of Latin for almost 4 years now, and it has given me an amazing opportunity with my dyslexia, ADHD, and dysgraphia to be able to express my interest in a foreign language that speaks to me and that is able to connect with my brain in a way that doesn't cause me frustration and allow me to get distracted through then my ADHD because of the frustration my dyslexia and dysgraphia will cause me. It has allowed me to delve deeper into a language and not dread having to fulfill the requirement of the colleges through their foreign language requirement, but be able to enjoy getting to engage in this class, in this course, that is such a unique opportunity and is something very unique to District 203, and I'm very lucky to be able to be a part of it, and I really hope that a lot of other kids who struggle with the same things that I do are able to do the same. So I request that you please reconsider the removal of the Latin 1 course and the phasing out of Latin.
On behalf of the whole board, thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Nancy Turner. She will be followed by Stacy Cunningham. Good evening and welcome.
Thank you. My name is Nancy Turner, and I'm going to read an email that I sent to the board members today regarding the rumored decision to drop Latin from the 203 curriculum. My children are graduates of Scott School, Madison Junior High, and Naperville Central, where they took Latin for 4 years. My husband and I bought our home in 203 so our kids could take Latin in high school. One of them is an aerospace engineer, the other is a professional organist, two widely different career paths. Yet Latin has served them both well. Its complexity taught them attention to detail and analytical analysis. Its literature, history, and philosophy gave them exposure to a different culture and era. Latin is not an expensive program to keep. All it requires is a teacher and some books. There is no special space or equipment needed that requires upgrading as technology changes. Latin is a program that offers prestige to 203's offerings and benefits that no other foreign language does. Since it is not a spoken language, the student who has audiolingual difficulties, that is, difficulty processing speech while listening to recordings or conversations at normal speaking speeds, or in different accents, especially in Spanish, in the classroom, and difficulty with pronunciation of the other language, the student in Latin can still receive the rigor of a foreign language course of study by studying Latin without the hearing and speech pressures of modern spoken languages. Latin also offers an in-depth study of the origins of the majority of multisyllabic words in the English language in a way that modern languages do not. American Sign Language, the newest offering in the curriculum, does not provide comparable linguistic and cultural study. Furthermore, Latin has been a tried and true pedagogical tool since the Middle Ages. It is not a passing fad. One of the other important benefits of foreign language study is that it exposes a student to another culture and asks them to open their mind to customs different from their own. Since Roman civilization is immutable and distant in time, the study of Latin immediately and without controversy opens the student's mind to a culture quite different from our own. It asks them to reflect on our culture as well, in a way that doesn't happen with the study of a modern language whose culture is evolving alongside our own. Some cultural examples are political structures, slavery, prejudice. Many scholars attribute our prejudices today to the Romans, position of women in society, and religion, to name a few. Nearly every aspect of our society is quite different from Roman culture, and this contrast allows for implicit and explicit comparisons that help us understand modern society. So I'm encouraging you to retain Latin in the 203 curriculum, and I encourage others who value the Latin program to contact the Board of Education. Thank you.
On behalf of the whole board, thank you for your comments. Our next speaker will be Stacy Cunningham. She will be followed by Nahil Kaki. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening. My name is Stacy Cunningham. I'm the Latin teacher at Naperville Central High School. I wrote a much longer email to the board, but I will spare you the majority of that email and read just a couple excerpts. I was very surprised to find out last week that Latin 1 will be removed from course offerings next year by the current plan. The primary concern, as I understand, is the concern of declining enrollment. I understand this administration to look at factors beyond student and community interest. As we slowly emerge from the most difficult years in education that we have ever experienced, many electives have seen declining enrollment. Currently, we have a Latin 1 class of 20, which is low, but in line with the enrollment drop that other smaller languages have also experienced. This year, our Chinese 1 class is 19 students. German 1 class has 28. I omit French because there's a junior high feeder program, and ASL because we do not have historical data. The freshman class at NCHS is also historically low in population size. Teaching remotely and losing the opportunity to recruit face-to-face in venues such as 8th grade orientation was a blow to all of us. While Naperville North does not offer a Latin 1 class this year, we have other examples of courses being run in one school, but not the other, due to varying interests, such as AP Euro, which is currently running at North, but not at Central. Beyond academic advantages of Latin, which are many and have been enumerated by many of my students, I also want to talk about what the Latin program does and will hopefully continue to offer to District 203. One silver lining of this news has been the outpouring of support from former students. I've had students who graduated more than a decade ago reach out to tell me how much the community in the Latin classroom meant to them during their high school years and beyond. In large high schools, such as North and Central, it can be difficult for students to find a sense of belonging, which the district is currently trying to address with the homeroom period at both high schools. This is something that has existed for years in the Latin classroom, and it would be a shame to lose this community which has fostered so many lasting connections. Ultimately, I am not asking for Latin to become a charity program, but I would ask for at least one more year of offering Latin 1 to see how numbers look now that we are very happily back to a more normal school year. This abrupt decision seems premature and short-sighted, as population sizes of our freshman classes are projected to increase, and a statewide mandatory language requirement will be implemented in 2028. I believe we have the interest in numbers to sustain six languages within District 203, making us competitive with other districts such as Stevenson. At Central this year, we are encouraging students to find your people, find your passion. Let's not take a course away from students who have found it here. Thank you for your time.
On behalf of the whole board, thank you for your comments. Our next speaker will be Nahal Kaki, followed by Fiona Hoba. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening. My name is Nihal Kaki. I'm a senior at Naperville Central High School. And as a student who has taken Latin for almost 4 years, I wanted to offer some perspective, some student perspective into how Latin has helped me. Academically, Latin could be considered one of the most enriching courses offered currently at Naperville Central High School. In AP Literature, we learned that there are three main literary connections we can make, that being with the Bible, Shakespeare, and Greco-Roman mythology. Now, when I'm in my literature class, I don't typically see people reference the Bible or Shakespeare, but I do see people reference Greco-Roman mythology. Latin offers many unique connections to all sorts of subjects in academics, ones that people will lose if we remove the Latin course offerings. For example, the English government is based off of the Roman Republic. This is something that people would not tend to see if we removed Latin. Other things such as art, government, politics, history, and so much more have been influenced by the Roman culture. And removing Latin will take away all of that knowledge from students who could learn. Latin serves as the foundation for all Romance languages and currently helps people learn unique languages without having to start from scratch. For me, Latin has offered so much in terms of knowledge. It has offered a platform for me to build off of and learn in new subjects, and I truly feel that freshmen who are entering the school will lose out if Latin is removed. Thank you.
On behalf of the whole board, thank you for your comments. Our next speaker will be Fiona Holba, followed by Atheno Shen. Good evening and welcome.
Thank you. My name is Fiona Holba, and I'm currently a sophomore at Naperville Central, and I'm in Latin 2. I'm also the third in my family to take this course. Both my older sisters who have taken it have loved it and have found many benefits from taking it. My oldest sister is a sophomore at Mizzou and is a pre-med major. She always talks about how Latin makes working in medicine so much more effortless. She also got a perfect ACT score in her English section, which she says is all thanks to taking Latin, which helped her in gaining a better understanding of English. My grandpa also owns his own practice in dentistry, and when he was younger, Latin was required for going into any medical field. This proves how helpful the language is. Coming to Latin is the highlight of my day. I am not only learning a language that is a building block for every other language, but I'm also learning history. I've been able to read artifacts in museums that are written in Latin, and I'm still in awe at my ability to understand history by reading it firsthand. I've also been able to understand other Romance languages slightly, all because they come from Latin. I, along with the rest of my class, believe that before making the decision, the board needs to hear what current and past students think. We feel that our voices have so much more power than those who have never taken Latin. I understand the district's viewpoint, but I don't think it's fair to rob students of the opportunity to learn a highly beneficial language. The benefits of taking this course are different than how it helps get into one's college, because the district states that one of the main reasons is colleges' view on Latin. And even if colleges don't have a preference on what language is taken, the student is able to get more educational accomplishments and success, which is what the district ultimately aims to do for students. Instead of focusing on how colleges view this course, the focus should be on how beneficial it is for the students taking it. Lastly, I don't fully understand the reason my class was given for getting rid of Latin. After discussing with my mom and both sisters, we have found that college counselors love hearing that Latin is in one's transcript and can help sway their choice selection. Please reconsider getting Latin and take into account how it benefits students, not just the school. Thank you.
On behalf of the whole board, thank you for your comments. Our next speaker will be Atheno Chen, followed by Amy Vogelsang. Good evening and welcome.
Hello, I'm Athena. I'm a junior at Naperville Central, and I'm also speaking on the issue of Latin. So first, I'd like to really emphasize how Latin will help our district stand out amongst other districts. Earlier in this meeting, you mentioned the Good News segment, which celebrated being bilingual in District 203, so it's really obvious how much of an emphasis we have on being bilingual and learning all those skills that come with being bilingual. So District 203 to offer Latin has long been one of its unique features that help it stand out compared to other school districts, like the District 204, which doesn't offer Latin. Whenever friends from other districts ask what language I take and I say Latin, they say, "Really? You take Latin? I wish my school offered Latin," just showing how much they wish they had different and unconventional languages offered. See, a district's ability to offer more languages besides your standard Spanish, French, Mandarin just proves how much excellence and focus it has on making sure kids excel in bilingual education. In fact, after COVID-19, Hinsdale South High School faced this issue where they only had 5 students enrolled in Latin 1, but its principal emphasized in a news article how Latin will absolutely not be cut, citing how much they wanted to keep their world language program thriving. We should act the same way as them, and we don't even have 5 students enrolled. In my honors Latin class, we have 28 students. Though not only does Latin have a positive impact on how our district looks to other districts, within the district itself, as previously mentioned, its positive impact on students is so powerful. The unique thing about Latin is that you're in a class for 4 years straight, which compared to other language classes that have you switching teachers every year, it helps you establish this community you don't get elsewhere. One of my friends said earlier to me today, Latin has been the only reason I go to school sometimes. Another friend has referred to Latin as a beautiful community. And so the teachers, Magister Cunningham, and the students make Latin a safe space where we can just be ourselves. And it's not only in the classroom, but also in extracurriculars. I compete in Curtamen, which is kind of like a scholastic pole Latin competition, and I'm also in Latin Club. And we can have all these wacky activities like painting potatoes, or painting in the windows for homecoming, or just like drawing random depictions of Greek gods in cartoons that we bond and laugh over, and it's truly extremely memorable. So at the end of the day, I know you care more about district rankings, and I know you care more about finances. You care about the students, and you deeply care for the youth of our community. And so you know that effective learning and growing only happens in a place where students feel welcomed and feel that they can be themselves, like in a place like Latin. Thank you.
On behalf of the whole board, thank you for your comments. Our next speaker will be Amy Vogelsang. She will be followed by John Blakey on behalf of Awake, Illinois.
Okay.
Good evening and welcome.
Good evening. My name is Amy Vogelsang, and I am a teacher at Naperville North. At the last Board of Education meeting, the in-person public comment section was dominated by people who did not express any connection to the Naperville 203 school community. They used that platform to push a regressive political agenda, the ultimate, if sometimes unspoken, goal of which is to dismantle public education. Public education is political, and it always has been. But students, faculty, and staff should never be treated as political pawns. The purpose of public education is not to precisely mirror the most conservative values in a community. It is to engage in learning that allows us all to be better people and neighbors, that prepares students to find and take their places in the world, that includes exposure to different people and perspectives. Queer, trans, and gender-expansive folks are part of our community. They belong in our classrooms and in our curriculum. Like all of their peers, they deserve to exist wholly and authentically at school. Assertions that efforts to make our schools more inclusive and equitable are somehow at odds with academic learning are unfounded. Learning happens when students see themselves and their experiences within a larger context, when they grapple with challenging ideas. Our students live in a world where they have more access to information and misinformation than ever before. It would be a disservice to them not to acknowledge a wide diversity of thought and experience, and to teach them how to make sense of it. Our students are capable, and they deserve a more robust education than the singular perspective being pushed by a vocal minority. I believe that the actions of this board reflect that. Thank you.
On behalf of the whole board, thank you for your comments. Our next speaker will be John Blakey. He will be followed by Sarah Segovich. Good evening and welcome.
Yeah, good evening. First things first, I'd like to say well done to everybody who spoke tonight. I didn't realize you guys were going to speak on Latin so very passionately, so well done. If I could say good luck in Latin, I would. My name is John Blakey. I'm with Children's Advocacy Group, Awake, Illinois, and would like 5 minutes, please. I'd like to cover a few things tonight. The first one is the equity plan. I want to thank Dr. Leeks for recently responding to the questions on the equity plan. I'm currently digesting the answers. I do want, however, want to thank District 203 for confirming that they have not implemented the equity plan's anti-racism training. Thank you. Number 2, the Safety Act. I want educators, parents and kids in District 203 to know that the Safety Act, which is a bill signed into law by Governor Pritzker in the name of equity, and comes into effect in January 23, and based on feedback from many law enforcement experts, will make our communities and schools less safe. The Act eliminates pre-trial cash bonds, meaning that criminals arrested for the following crimes will be charged and then could be released as they await trial: second-degree murder, arson, carjacking, robbery, threatening a public official. Trespassing laws will also make it harder for police and building owners to remove people from their property. This includes schools. To give an example, Will County State Attorney Jim Glasgow, a Democrat, warned at a speech here in Naperville that I have 640 people in jail, all their bonds will be extinguished on January 1st, and 60 of these are charged with murder. So according to police, the Safety Act will actually make our communities less safe. It's important that parents and schools in District 203 educate themselves on the Safety Act. Awake Illinois has sought advice from experts, including DuPage County Sheriff Mendrick, and we are very concerned. I'm asking District 203 Board to advise what they have done to understand how this Act might affect operation of our schools after January 1st, including any advice they've sought from Naperville Police Department. The third thing I want to talk about tonight is the importance of elections. Several issues affecting the future of District 203 education will depend on whether Governor Pritzker and others remain in power after the November midterm elections. Parents and teachers alike need to carefully consider the following. Do you want to live in a state whose public school systems continue to deteriorate and whose population is shrinking, including students, teachers, families and businesses who are leaving the state? Do you want to take the risk that your kids might be locked out of public school again for prolonged periods without scientific justification? Will your kids be unlawfully mandated to wear masks again when the science tells us that masks did more harm than they did good? Will you allow policy to be heavily influenced by teachers' unions who do not put the interests of kids first and are committed to turning the kids into social justice activists? If District 203 bows to state pressure and adopts the comprehensive sex ed standards, which Pritzker has already signed into Illinois law, will your child's education be enriched when CSE teaches the following? It teaches sexual orientation and gender identity to 5 to 7-year-olds. It teaches that gender identity exists on a spectrum. It teaches the role of hormone therapy, as well as anal, oral sex to our 8 to 10-year-olds. It teaches masturbation and reproductive justice to our 11 to 13-year-olds. I cringe when I say that in front of these kids. It's shocking that it's in there. Oddly, the sex standards also require students to define racism and to study systemic oppression and how it affects sexual agency of communities of colour and marginalised communities. No idea what that means. Don't rely on my word, look it up yourself. We have posted the official sex ed standards on awakeill.com. You can look it up. So the message is, it's up to you, the parents of District 203, the citizens of Illinois. It's time to decide what kind of future you want for your kids. I urge you to not to sit this one out, to do your homework. Your kids' future depends on it. I'm praying for change in Illinois. God bless you.
On behalf of the whole board, thank you for your comments. Our next speaker will be Sarah Segvich. She will be followed by Barb Enright. Good evening and welcome.
My name is Sarah Segvich. I'm a sophomore at Naperville Central, and I'm currently enrolled in Latin 2. As of Friday, it was announced that Latin will no longer be available to future students at North or Central. Hearing the rationale behind discontinuing the course was deeply frustrating to me as a student. It was explained that Latin courses on a high school transcript do not increase the likelihood of admission into health science programs, despite data from College Board SAT group reports showing students who study Latin score 140 to 160 points higher on the SAT than others. In addition, the decline in students' enrollment that was referenced in the Board of Education documents failed to represent the effects of COVID. Enrollment dropped by half in the years without 8th grade orientation. This did not follow trends of previous years, hence my frustration with the district decision not to wait and see if numbers improve in the 22 to 23 school year. It was also argued that Latin is no longer relevant in higher educational institutions based on data from Schoollinks showing 86 colleges nationwide offer Latin studies. However, when looking at American Sign Language, a class that was added just this year, only 85 colleges offer an ASL program, again from Schoollinks databases. Finally, when I attended this morning's meeting discussing rationale behind the changes, I was told that we had to account for the decrease in enrollment at the District 203 high schools. Yet, according to our financial year 22 to 23 budget document, after many years of modest enrollment decreases, the district student enrollment has increased over the past few years and is projected to increase slightly over the next 5 years. Based off of these future trends, I believe the removal of Latin is a permanent solution to a temporary problem and hope our district reconsiders this decision. Thank you.
On behalf of the whole board, thank you for your comments. Our next speaker is Barb Enright.
I have handouts for what do I get those?
We'll pass it out. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening. I agree, the students here, I want to go to school in District 203. Very impressive. Latin is a dead language. We all have heard this, we all know this, but there's more to this story. Over 60% of English words have Greek or Latin roots. And in the vocabulary of the sciences and technology, that figure rises to over 90%. Learning Latin lifts the academic outcomes of the student. Having Latin on school applications for post-secondary education is unique and helps a student stand out. Latin improves standardized test scores. Latin is not only good for law and medical fields, but all of the English, math, and science fields as well. Latin provides a diverse class for students of all backgrounds and interests. Students that take Latin go on to four-year universities, junior colleges, trades, and technical fields. Latin accomplishes these things by improving many different areas. First, vocabulary. About 80% of the entries in any English dictionary are borrowed mainly from Latin. As I mentioned before, over 60% of all English words have Greek or Latin roots. A single Latin root can generate over 100 words. So 10 roots can give a student more than 1,000 words they can decrypt on their own. This can assist in comprehension as well. English and grammar. Latin helps students with their grasp of basic grammar and syntax. Those standardized test scores highly benefit from both of those areas. Math scores. Latin's grammatical structure has much in common with the structure of mathematical logic in that it requires attention to systems, details, and thinking in an orderly and process-based manner. Learning Latin offers benefits in learning math. Ability to learn foreign languages. I think one of the students earlier recognized this, but Latin is a root language for many other languages. European languages derive more than 80% of words from Latin, and most of their structure, grammar, and lexicon come from Latin. Once the student has understood the concepts of agreement, inflected nouns, conjugated verbs, grammatical gender in Latin, they're better equipped with the building blocks to learn another language. Understanding of history. Latin is taught through the vehicle of history and literary texts of the ancient world, and it complements all the other history courses that a student will take. Preparation for scientific, legal, and medical careers. Of course, Latin supplies many of the root words for the specialized vocabularies of the modern sciences. It is also the language of law, politics, and logic. Most legal terms come from Latin. Problem-solving skills, applicable in computer programming and science. The decryption, the decryption and deduction
Time.
skills that are learned through
On
Latin
behalf
are
of the whole
also
board, thank you for your comments. Okay. I do not have any more public comment requests. Does anyone else in the audience wish to address the board? This will conclude our public comment period. Oh. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening. My name is Emerson Batzinger. I'm a junior at Naperville Central, and this is my second year taking Latin. I wanted to argue in favor of keeping Latin as a class available for incoming high school students, and I wanted to share my experience as a Latin student and share to you why I think the class is so valuable. Latin has greatly enhanced reading and writing skills in myself, and it also has greatly enhanced my language learning abilities. This year, I was given the opportunity to go to Italy, and I found that I picked up the language of Italian much quicker than the people I attended the trip with. I think that Latin is a really important skill for language learning and will benefit students throughout their whole lives. And the data showed that since 2019, Latin enrollment has gone down. But like my other peers mentioned, I think it's really important that we take into account COVID for this, because I didn't even hear about Latin until my freshman year because we didn't have an 8th grade orientation, and I didn't have any siblings or friends in the class to share it to me. And I think that the data doesn't show a fair representation because it hasn't represented a normal school year in the District of 203. I also wanted to mention the Latin community and how important it is for the students here at Naperville Central. The students in Latin love Latin, and they participate in a lot of outside of school Latin activities. And I think that Magistra and the other students really play an important part in the school, and my experience here at Naperville Central would not have been the same without it. I also wanted to mention how District 203 is constantly ranked as one of the top districts in the country, and I definitely agree with that because of how many opportunities the school district offers us. I've been to a total of 9 different schools, and I've never had a district serve me as well as this district. And I think what makes this district so good is that we have accessibility to so many different types of courses. And we have so many available options to us, which when I know what it's like to not have these at your fingertips, I think that having Latin is a great opportunity for students. It gives students a community, and it enhances the students' learning, and it would really be a shame to cut the program. Thank you.
On behalf of the whole board, thank you for your comments. As we finish our public comment period, I want to thank each of our participants on behalf of the whole Board of Education. We appreciate your advocacy. I also want to acknowledge the public comments submitted by email from many of our community members. We also appreciate your advocacy. I want to assure each public commenter, regardless of the format in which you have commented, your concerns have been heard by the Board of Education. We thank you for taking the time to keep us informed, and we consider you to be a vital part of the process of reflecting the views of our community. As a reminder, because the questions raised in public comment address district operational matters, the board has designated our superintendent as the spokesperson for the district as our designee to respond to public comment, and he will apprise the board accordingly. This will conclude our public comment period. Okay, so we will now move on in our agenda to action by consent. I will entertain a motion for the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
A motion and a second are heard. Please call the roll, Mrs. Patton.
Gerke. Aye. Fitzgerald.
Aye.
Kosminski.
Aye.
Kush.
Aye.
Wanke.
Aye.
McMillan.
Aye.
Casey.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. So we will move on in our agenda item to item 7, communications. And we will begin with item 7.01, Superintendent Staff School Report.
I just briefly want to remind the board and to the community, remind you of the Career Motivate, Naperville 203's 8th grade Career Exploration Day coming up on Friday, October 21st, both a morning and afternoon session. This is being coordinated in partnership with area businesses. We plan to host an 8th grade Career Exploration Day to motivate students to continue their career planning and exploration. The purpose of Career Motivate is to provide hands-on experience for students aligned with the district's comprehensive counseling curriculum to deepen their understanding of the careers available in our community and across career pathways. There's information on how employers in our community can volunteer to help and participate on this, find that on the website under Career Motivate. So hopefully we can get a lot of participation on this. Looking good so far.
Thank you for that reminder. Okay, so we'll move on to item 7.02, President's Report. I just want to briefly say I was so lucky to be able to attend each of the Good News events that were featured, and I know there were many other board members who were able to attend as well. Those were great, I thought, kickoff events for our partners in growth. It was really exciting to see different families in our community partnering with the district and sort of kicking off the year with events to celebrate. So, great events. Okay, moving on to item 7.03, Board of Education reports. Do we have any Board of Education reports? Donna.
Thank you. I wanted to celebrate an event that I was able to attend to from my liaison school, Steeple Run, and they were recognized at the last meeting in our Good News because they were one of the 3 schools in the district that received the Blue Ribbon Award. But I was asked to attend there for their community event, and it was super exciting to see so many community members from Steeple Run come together to celebrate the accomplishments of the students, the staff, and the administration and our community. So it was just really a wonderful event, and I think it's important to note that when our community comes together like that, we are partners in success, and it was just a really nice way to celebrate that. So thank you.
Great. Do we have any other Board of Education reports? Okay, so we will move on in our agenda item then to discussion without action, and we'll begin with item 8.01, Isb Resolutions.
Okay, so this would be the first of at least 2 conversations the board would have an opportunity to have prior to the joint annual conference. And this is our annual process, is to really present the recommendations of the delegate assembly and for the board to deliberate and discuss each of the recommendations to determine what guidance to provide their delegate for voting at the delegate assembly during the joint annual conference. So administration also has a copy of these and is in the process of reviewing them. We have yet to receive the hard copies that we typically respond to. I know some of us like to write notes in the on the margins or whatever. So you know, in kind of the overall review, while we're disappointed the the committee doesn't recommend adoption of the one submitted by District 203. Overall, there's nothing really that jumps out shockingly to us. But for what we would be asking for here, if there's any specific recommendations that board members would like some input at the next meeting from administration, then we can prepare that. But I'd encourage now the board to discuss to discuss overall the recommendations submitted.
Okay, thank you for that review. So we will definitely note the ones where we want to see some additional feedback. Briefly, as we are looking at this, just continuing to look at the recommendations put out by the committee and the committee that forms the recommendations, it highlights for us just to continue monitoring our efforts to try to ensure that we are fully represented at ISB. Those divisions are what makes up this group, as well as what makes up the nominating committee, which is for the leadership of ISB. I've spoken about this in the past, that we have some of our larger unit districts that are in DuPage have highlighted to our ISB leadership that we're a very, very large district at DuPage. We have 1 representation on this committee. We're not represented on the nominating committee, and it's just something to continue to monitor because, as you can see from the changes to how many resolutions are considered for adoption and how many are not to be presented, which I supported those resolutions. I was a part of that group. I spoke with you guys a little bit about the group that put in the new recommendations as to how the resolutions committee handles the various levels, it does highlight the importance of the resolutions committee. So I think it's something that we want to continue to monitor as we go forward in the future, and continue to talk with ISB about any efforts that they might have to more equitably represent all students in the leadership that makes up the nominating committee as well as the resolutions committee. Okay, sorry, with that being said, that's sort of overarching. Questions from the Board of Education or discussion on any of the resolutions committee recommendations or areas where we want to see the district give us additional, information about their views? Do you want to start with yours, the resolution that you put forward, and we can kind of start with talking about that?
Sure. Yeah, so the alternative fuel school bus funding resolution was recommended do not adopt by the ISB. This is very disappointing, and the rationale for it kind of brings up funding sources that were not implied in the resolution. I've been thinking about this, since the decision was made, and the challenge is if we appeal, it doesn't automatically go back to the floor for a vote. We need to have it voted on to go back to the floor for a vote, and the new rules are going to make it a 2/3 requirement. Not a 50% requirement. And I don't know that I've seen, maybe one time, a do not adopt has even gone back up for a vote. So I think the threshold is extremely hard to overcome. The raise to 2/3, I think doesn't make it likely for success. I think it's best if we not appeal this one this year, kind of see how some things play out. The EPA has already started, providing some funding in this direction. There seems to be some momentum. Kind of see how things play out, and then, seeing where we are next June, kind of rewrite the resolution and kind of address potential funding sources that were not indicated clearly in this one, and assumptions were made on a part of ISB. So,
Donna.
First of all, thank you, Joe, for putting the resolution forward and putting all the hard work and the research that you put into it. I would agree with your recommendation, and I will commit to helping you continue to work on this and looking towards more research for funding. So I think together we'll make it stronger. So, yep.
I think that the 2/3 vote of the resolutions committee is going to be a really heavy thing to get over. So I would say that we would be better off to revise it rather than potentially chance it not passing and having to get through a 2/3, especially because it's so hard to overcome that, the no recommendation. So again, highlighting the importance of that committee and their recommendations. So, other thoughts? Charles?
So just so I understand, the thought is to, rather than try to appeal it this year, revise, then bring it back as a revised or a new resolution up for brand new consideration next year, as opposed to revising this one. Is that the?
Joe.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm recommending. There were some issues with a similar resolution that Champaign brought last year. We were able to revise it, rewrite it, and reframe that resolution. Those issues were addressed. This funding issue is a new wrinkle that came up, and I think we need to address that and not let districts assume that you know, the rationale that IASB gave is what we were, yeah, that wasn't from us. That was not our assumption on funding. So I think we need to clarify that in order to move forward. But, you know, we can still work toward this commitment toward, you know, reducing carbon footprint in the district and, you know, advocating for, you know, cleaner energy sources, cleaner buses.
Okay. So I just wanted to echo what Donna said about, and others have said about your spearheading this. It's really important. Glad to hear that we're not necessarily thinking about giving up, but more regroup and come back at it, because I think it's really important, and we'll give it another shot next time around. So thank you for all your work on this, though.
Okay. Donna.
Are we moving on to a different resolution?
Is there, I'm happy to, again, we won't do any voting until our next meeting. This is just our first conversation, but happy to discuss it further if you have additional comments.
I'd like to talk about a different resolution.
Okay.
If we're done with this, I just don't want you to think that we're ready to move on.
I wasn't thinking that we were ready to move on altogether, just this one. So that's good, that's good. I think we've got a good plan to revise and come back stronger. Additional requests for administrative feedback or conversation from the board on any of the resolutions or position statements. They did a lot of clean out. I mean, there's a lot of things proposed here. They're cutting a lot of stuff, which is abnormal. Again, this is all in part the result of that committee that met to kind of talk about this whole process and to streamline things. But they definitely went pretty far in terms of cutting things that have just been passed even, including our resolution. So I know that that's something to discuss as well. Donna.
So for resolution number 3, I know that these, you know, are obviously written in a fashion that they, you know, would affect the entire state, but I'd like to understand the impact if this were to go. I know they did not recommend it, but if this were to go, if this would impact our community in any way, like if we fall into this category at all. No, not at all. Okay.
I mean, I can look at a map and be
Yeah.
certain, but I'm just quick
Okay.
scan of,
Okay.
I don't believe so.
Okay, well, that would be my question for next time, if we could see if there's any impact or effect of a resolution number 3 on our community. I have other questions.
I do not believe there are any within our district borders.
On resolution 1, it seems very positive, but I would be interested to hear any particular feedback from our financial.
Yeah, so I did have an opportunity to hear from our CFO, Mike Francis. He indicated it's doubtful, and we have policy to kind of govern our fund balances anyways, that we would ever see that level of fund balance. However, obviously, then the flexibility to be in place would be something we'd support. So I think we have mechanisms in place that would ever really prevent that from happening. As you know, we're already in the conversation about drawing down fund balance as it is, and we're not even close to that. So I do not believe it will impact us in any way.
So that's the first 3 that were allowed to be presented to the group in terms of, it looks like there's quite a few that were the resolutions committee voted to not present. And then we also have the amended existing positions. Let's take the amended existing positions next, because that we already went through the first of the, we went through the 3 new resolutions. Questions about the amended existing positions? Donna.
So number 6 is coming from our neighboring school district, Indian Prairie District 204. I was wondering if we have, I know they have a district rationale there, but this is fairly a brief statement. I'm wondering if there's anything more information that we can have on this. Obviously if it's impacting Indian Prairie, well, this impacts every district, but I just would like to have some more rationale and understanding as to, if we could get more information, that'd be great.
There are 2 from Indian Prairie 204. I don't think that we have anything greater in this document, but potentially they may have submitted more documentation as a part of their rationale that they put forward. I'd be happy to ask them if they would be willing to share with us their original documentation for both of their resolutions, if you wish.
Well, you can, but number 8, I read through and have a clearer understanding, and they're recommending to adopt that one. So I guess I want to understand the controversy, if I'm missing something in number 6. So I am absolutely fine with number 8.
Okay.
And the recommendation and the resolution. I guess I'm just wondering if I'm missing something in number 6 that I should be aware of. So I particularly had a question on number 6.
Okay.
Thank
All right.
you.
What about any of the other position statements, or let's just handle position statements first because we have the other ones at the end. Any other of the amended existing position statements, do we want additional information? Okay, I don't see anyone. So again, if you have additional questions that you want to have the administration provide documentation, send a question to the board, to Dan, and he'll have that prepared for our next meeting. Okay, then we have a whole section of do not present. Are there any questions about any of the do not presents? We won't have an opportunity to vote on them. So looks like this is where the new rules are really having an impact. Anything that has been presented more than once had to meet that higher threshold. So there was quite a few that were recommended do not present. That has never happened before. This is new. The Constitution, however, included this authority, and the committee has now chosen to use it. Okay, if you have any additional questions that come up, please do the same thing, send them over to Dan. And then current position statements, deletions, and amendments. Any questions here? Donna?
I'm sorry, I have a question going back to this new do not, the fact that they're utilizing the do not present. So is this, since we can't vote or do anything about it, is this more of a
informational, I think.
Attempt at transparency? And,
yes.
Okay. So, so do you foresee, like, let's say, for instance, I just want to understand the process a little better. Let's say, for instance, our electric school bus one ended up in the do not present as opposed to where it ended up. Could they revise these and bring them back in a different format? Or, I mean, like, because it sounds like you're gonna, if you've brought it back a number of times, it gets put on the do not present anyway. So I guess, is there like no hope for these? I guess I want to understand what the...
I think that it looks like, if you look at the Resolutions Committee analysis, I'm looking at particularly the gun storage one. It says, oh, sorry, it's number 10. Okay, got it, yep. So if you look at the Resolutions Committee analysis, something to get put in this category would have to be substantially the same. So I think no change or substantially the same, and had failed to pass the delegate assembly the prior year, and they still could go forward if they got 2/3 of the affirmative vote from the Resolutions Committee. But if that was not met, then the do not present prevailed. But it's only, I think that it's time limited. Like there's I thought I read, I could be wrong. Doesn't it say? Yeah. Yeah. So then it looks like maybe it's just 1 year and then it could be resubmitted the following. Yeah. Okay. But like I said, this was constitutional, this authority. They just had not been using it. Okay. Going on to the current position statements, deletions, and amendments. Questions or thoughts? Or needs for additional information? So this is our resolution that we did in 2020. They're deleting already. That was the question that I had, is the resolution with regard to e-learning. I know that the resolution sponsored by our board had allowed for public health uses as well for e-learning. Is that something that we feel like, obviously in this case, I don't think there's anything we can do about this. I think this will just be one vote, but it's just a question that I have in terms of, continued advocacy.
At this point, I don't believe it's something that I'm too concerned about.
Okay.
Decisions regarding response to any public health emergency are not going to be done unilaterally by the district anyways. It'll be in consultation with public health agencies in our state government, local and state government, so I don't not necessarily believe so.
Okay. Amanda.
Could you just help me understand again? I know I went through this last year, but by deleting these things, does this just mean that they wouldn't support them if it comes up legislatively, or what does this actually mean by them? Like, for example, deleting number 4.01, self-insure risk, or I just don't understand what the point is.
Of removing them?
Yeah.
I think, and again, this committee that I sat on that was talking a little bit about the lengthy number of position statements and the lengthy number of things that were being suggested as ISB priorities. I think it's sort of an effort trying to paraphrase their words, an effort to streamline a little bit more so that the priorities that we have are more powerful, because we're not, lobbying all these tiny issues. The perfect example of that is the one that was like a one school district issue, the one about the school district police force that had actually been a resolution that had passed recently, but was really involving one or two districts. And so their concern was that by having so many priorities, it meant that there really was no real priority because there were just so many things. And so I think they were really trying to streamline all the position statements, some of which were very old. They have gone pretty far, though. They went, like I said, this had passed in 2020 and it wasn't entirely enacted and it's gone.
So that's helpful. So are you saying that once something's passed, then it just stays on until they go through and delete it? It's not like every year they refresh their priorities?
Correct. That was it. This whole entire document just kept on going in perpetuity. And so they were really making an effort to weed through.
So that is actually a healthy exercise.
Yes, it's one that I would suggest with regard to their directors that they have, which have also been the same in perpetuity, and the population has all moved different spots. So actually the process is probably positive in terms of utilizing the constitutional prerogative to look at things, that exists for them in terms of the divisions as well, and it's something that they may want to look at there as well.
So just one more question around that then. So if they were to remove something that we felt like was important to keep, would we then have to just set it forth as a new resolution next year? Okay.
Well, I think it doesn't, does it say exactly what, usually the kinds of things like this are included as one vote. Does it say that at the front, the agenda for the delegate assembly? I'm just looking really quickly. I mean, it does mention a consent agenda, which I would assume this would be a part of. But I would say the first step, if we had concerns, would be to express them to ISB. That's what this whole process is about. But usually, by the time they print this, it's final, and there just aren't any changes that are made. So then we would have to go forward and kind of sponsor another position statement for the next year. Donna.
So I think at the top end of this, it says that there's 3 reasons they're coming off, either because they were accomplished, they'll never be accomplished, or they're no longer relevant because of time. And so I just want to point out, in particular, on page 20, 2.48, the PTEL no penalty for under levy, because that's something that, Kristen, you worked on very hard, and it has been passed through Public Act 1020895. And so, which wasn't a bill that it necessarily began in, it got shoved into an omnibus. So it was not clear that it had passed until recently. So, but that's something that's coming off that she spent hours upon hours on that I think didn't even get, I think it got do not recommend 1 year too as well, right? Like the first year through or something, or?
No, I think it was
Oh.
supported, but
Okay.
you actually are highlighting two things. Two of the resolutions that are being removed were ours that we
Right.
sponsored, and they're being removed because they actually got enacted.
Right.
Which is pretty exciting,
Exactly.
you know?
So,
Yeah.
but that's one in particular that I know I've talked to a couple of my colleagues with, and we weren't sure it had gone through, and so it's
Yeah.
nice to see that there's a public act here that shows
Yes.
that it has. So.
Well, I mean, and that shows the importance of this process. I mean, like, two of them are ones that we've only sponsored in my time on the board, three that I know of. Well, this is the fourth. But before that, there had been three others, and one of them wasn't enacted, but the other two now have been, which is pretty exciting. Mhm. Okay. Any other questions or comments with regard to the position statements or anything of the kind? Okay, if a question comes up, please do send those ahead to Dan, and then we'll be voting on the resolutions at our next meeting. Okay, so we'll go on in our agenda item then to item 8.02, new courses.
Okay, annually in accordance with the Board of Education policy, district staff reviews curriculum offerings at the high school level, makes recommendations for new courses to be added, as well as considering the removal of some through the course audit process. Our Assistant Superintendent for Learning Services, Jane Willard, leads that work, and Jane will present on behalf of the staff this evening.
Good evening. I also would like to point out that our instructional teams from Naperville Central and Naperville North are also present with us this evening, as well as our Director of Language Acquisition, Marion Friebus-Flamen, who all have been part of this collaboration and recommendations. So tonight, I am here to recommend 2 high school courses for Board of Education approval to be implemented at the start of the 2023-24 school year, and also to update the Board of Education on the rationale for the removal of Latin beginning in the 2023-24 school year. The Post-Secondary Workforce Readiness Act was first signed into law on July 29, 2016, with recent additions done this past May. The POWER Act is a framework to help students avoid remedial coursework and to help them persist and prepare for post-secondary education. The Act creates more clear and consistent expectations for college and career preparation, starting in 6th grade with the Illinois Post-Secondary and Career Expectations Framework, which is the PACE framework, which is also what we are building our Career Motivate platform off of as well. The components of this POWER Act include competency-based high school graduation requirements, post-secondary and career expectations, scaling of 12th grade transitional math and English courses, college and career pathway endorsements on high school diplomas. Both of the courses we are bringing forward tonight align to this framework and will prepare students for differentiated post-secondary options. The POWER Act includes a set of strategies to support Illinois students in their transition from high school to post-secondary education, workforce training, and careers. A major barrier to post-secondary persistence and completion is engaging in remedial education with students enrolling in courses that do not lead to college credit. Transitional math legislation requires that all math courses ensure and prepare Naperville graduates to transition into college credit-bearing courses upon entrance to post-secondary institutions. Transitional mathematics or traditional mathematics curriculum in high school was developed with a single pathway of courses to prepare students for calculus. The purpose of adding Algebra 2, modeling, and problem solving is to create differentiated pathways of rigorous, relevant courses that meet real students' needs. Our Algebra 2 course pathway creates pathway to majors and careers that require a heavy emphasis on calculus. Our new recommendation, Algebra 2 Modeling and Problem Solving, will allow us to create a pathway to majors and careers that do not require this intense focus on calculus, but include the depth and rigor needed in a sequence to AP statistics. This course will provide students with proficiency in Algebra 2 concepts. Students will also gain knowledge and skills to use the mathematical practices to make sense of problems and persevere in solving them, reason abstractly and quantitatively, construct viable arguments, and critique the reasoning of others, and while modeling their own real-world mathematics. All skills learned in this course will lead to successful college and career experiences. Topics will be taught within various contexts that are relevant to students that are interested in finance, business fields, health fields, data science, social science, humanities, and technical education. This visual is a description of both the Algebra 2 and Algebra 2 modeling and problem-solving courses. You will notice that both sequences can lead to AP opportunities and prepares all students for post-secondary success in 2-year, 4-year, and technical education settings. In board docs, you will find a detailed chart that illustrates possible sequences for students to follow. This information will be clearly communicated through school links during the 4-year planning process and with counselors during their student meetings. Algebra 2 modeling and problem solving will be developed over the course of this year with teachers from both Central and North under the direction of the department chairs. Oh, sorry. I thought I was driving this. I'm not driving. Moving on. We are excited to share that the graduating class of 2022 was our first class of seniors to receive college and career endorsements on their diploma. As a reminder, in order to receive an endorsement, students must take 2 years of career-specific coursework that includes at least 6 hours of early college credits. They must complete multiple team challenges, such as incubator or our architecture courses, be academically on track for college credits, and participate in at least 60 hours of work-based learning experiences. As we move to develop additional diploma endorsements around specific career pathway areas, we must continue to focus on scaling opportunities for students within our own programs and school district to engage in intensive career exploration experiences. This requires us to take a look at the courses we offer and equity of access for students, which is the reason we are recommending a career internship course this evening. Work-based learning is a continuum of experiences to expose students to employability competencies and provides ways to learn about careers and work sites. Collectively, career development experiences help students affirm whether yes or no their career areas of interest. These experiences can include guest speakers, business site tours, job shadows, mentoring, and internships. As we dive a bit deeper to the more intensive experiences, internships come to our mind. As defined in the Illinois Career Pathway Dictionary, a work-based learning experience is created through partnerships with the school and the employer. The experience should mirror authentic work conditions found in the pathways we explore. Students can be compensated and receive a school credit for the experience. Additionally, the learning outcomes should align to professional skills, and students should be assessed in their progression in development of these skills. In order to award diploma endorsements, again, students must complete at least 60 hours of work-based learning during their high school career. Beyond legislation framing our work, the importance of helping students develop career readiness continues to be a charge from our community and our business partners. These stakeholder groups understand that students need to begin developing essential employability skills at an early age. The new internship course proposed tonight will embed opportunities for students to earn income and credentials, begin making professional networks and relationship with mentors, gain a greater awareness of workplace expectations, organization, concepts, and context to career areas of interest. They will also recognize and be incentivized student attainment of knowledge and demonstration of skills, which is important for success in both post-secondary and in employment if they choose to go directly to employment. They can gain feedback and affirmation of denial or affirmation of their career choices before they leave our systems. In an effort to transcript and scale our work-based learning opportunities, we are recommending the new course, which will be called Career Internship. This course will serve as a capstone course for students who seek to develop on-the-job skills in a specific career pathway area. The course will be designed to both develop students' employability skills across all careers while providing exposure and training in the student's career area of interest. This course will be offered in a blended format, allowing students to be on-premise to learn, but actually on the premise in the job, which is the most important piece. Students will elect to take this course as a semester or a full year, since it's a repeatable credit. Students will complete work both in the classroom setting and on the job. We also hope to scale this in the summer to offer internships to students that may not be able to take this course during the school year. At the high school level, we use a course audit process to help define and streamline curricular offerings that best align with Illinois learning standards, industry trends, student interests, and post-secondary preparation. The course audit process engages teachers and leaders in the work of evaluating current courses to determine if they still offer relevance, rigor, and endurance, or if a new course needs to be developed to fill a particular need. This process ensures that we are providing students with rigorous courses that prepare them for the next course in a chosen pathway. Cross-Curricular Connections reflects current trends and research and provides high-interest options for students in every content area. In some departments, this requires minimal adjustments, and in others, significant changes. This work is an outcome of the strong leadership of the high school principals, APs, and department chairs. This process is done in the best interest of students and is fiscally responsible as we look to offer courses based on employability and industry demands. This process contributes to the comprehensive model by challenging departments to continually review courses and explore new options for students. In order for a program of study, which is a 4-year commitment, to a program with low enrollment, it must be an and statement. Enrollment and alignment with post-secondary goals and career pathways in order to maintain a program with low enrollment. Leadership takes this process very seriously and considers the impact of these decisions. As we look forward to the next generation of learners, shifts in the global economy, and post-secondary readiness, we need to use our resources to ensure that our courses align to college and career readiness. We use data to determine this goal, and there are times when we will need to be bold and require courses that students enjoy, but we know there are opportunities that lead to other outcomes. Through the course audit process, enrollment history data, post-secondary feedback, relevance to college and careers, we are recommending that the Latin sequence be removed beginning with Latin 1 as a course offering at Naperville North and Central. Removal of this course will not impact the overall course sequence for students currently in Latin courses. Students currently enrolled in Latin will complete the sequence identified in their 4-year plan. Incoming 2023-24 Naperville Central and Naperville North freshmen will be able to select language offerings in the following areas: American Sign Language, Chinese Mandarin, French, German, and Spanish. Again, removal was based on post-secondary information, student enrollment, college and career relevance, and student feedback. This decision is a result of multi-year conversations and analysis and follows the course audit process. We understand that the removal of any elective course is personal and impacts stakeholders very differently. We thoughtfully considered students who are already in the course sequence and ensured that they continue with this learning. We must balance this with the responsibility we have to offer high-leverage courses that lead to viable post-secondary options and are aligned to growth career areas. These are not easy decisions, and we keep our diverse student population at the center of all of our recommendations and discussions. Again, these are recommendations for the board to consider. We will now open up to any questions.
I'm going to recommend that we chunk the questions. We have 3 different kind of groups here. The Algebra 2 recommendation, the career internship recommendation, and then the Latin recommendation. So if we begin with math, any questions from members of the board for Jane?
Amanda.
Not actually a question. I just really appreciate it. Like, I was a math major, and if I would have had that in high school where it actually applied, I think it would have been so much more helpful. So I think it's great to have a little bit more diversity around the math field. So I think it's a great addition. Thanks.
Great. I'm going to give a little shout out to both of our departments at Naperville North and Naperville Central. Last year, or 2 years ago, when we removed a course, we gave them the opportunity to say, dream, what would you like? And they created a very, very good course that will meet the needs of many of our students, and for sure gives us, we have feedback from our colleges and universities that the rigorous college calculus is actually not required for everyone anymore. There's different pathways. And so that is a celebration, and I want to give a lot of credit to our high school leadership and to our department chairs. So we're very excited about that.
Go ahead.
Mine's not actually a question either, it's a comment. And I appreciate the fact that it tends to be very sequential math, and so I love the fact that this is giving a little bit of more of a tree aspect of allowing people to have a decision to veer from, to a different direction. So super excited to see us offering some more options so that students can continue in math even if calculus is not their ultimate goal. So thank you.
Okay, so I just have questions that are a little bit more thinking of a student who's making these course selections. So I would liken this in the description to the choice that if you're wanting to take like an honors English, that you would have honors English and honors journalism. They're equivalent courses, right?
Similar. When you say, talk to me when you mean equivalent.
Well, you're taking Algebra 2 in both cases.
Right.
And thus you're still going to be acquainted with Algebra 2
Yes.
fundamentals, important for both algebra and, looking at SAT and things like that. I know people talk a little bit about Algebra 2 as a gateway course in terms of preparation. So both of these would offer that. If you are unsure of your pathway, so thinking of some of my students, like as they're making these choices, they're not exactly sure where they're going, it looks as if you could take pre-calculus with Algebra 2, but the other one, it doesn't really recommend the regular pre-calc. It would recommend the business pre-calc, or would you still be?
You could. Okay. You could still take that. This is not a gatekeeper. I'm going to use the example of geometry and construction.
Okay.
Those are probably, those are similar, but have very different instructional models. So the way in which the instruction and students engage in the instruction is different, but they can have the same outcomes. And I talked with the department chairs about this. I said, talk to me, like, same question. Can they not go into pre-calc? And they said, absolutely. But most often, they would take that because of their choice of study later on. And we will probably be bringing more courses back in the spring, math, because right now AP pre-calculus is a new College Board course. So that's something we have to understand as well in this sequence too.
Okay, thank you. That's so helpful because I think it's so exciting to see students who are ready to specify, be able to specify, but just for those who aren't quite certain, I just want to make sure that they would be equivalent and you could still go on to a different choice.
Yeah. And Algebra 2 and modeling and problem solving is a good example of something that we did. We removed Algebra Core a couple of years ago, and that was emotional for our staff. And we tossed out what is a course that we could develop, and this is what they came, and I think it's a much better course, and it's a celebration for our math department.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board on the math portion of the presentation? Okay.
Okay, career internship.
Questions or comments on the career internship? Charles.
So there's a question, but first of all, a comment. I'm just really excited to see this one. Just as a leading district, the opportunity to really help kids understand what it is to operate in the workplace and to really take the practical applications of what they've learned in the classroom and actually apply it to something on a day-to-day basis. I think it really enhances the learning, so I'm excited to see us moving forward, or I'm so excited to see this on the docket. The question I have is, did I hear you mention that the goal is to scale this at some point so that students could actually do this over the summer as well?
It would be great. We actually tried to do this year. I think we were a little aggressive in our planning and excitement because it was hard to find employers. So we feel like if we can get employers during the school year and they really see the benefits, they'll be more apt to doing it in a short term. But yes, we would love to scale this in the summer, and we think it's better to do it during the school year first and grab those. One other thing I should have mentioned in my script is our own IT department is some of our first that are employing some of our students right now. So we have to put our money where our mouth is and employ our own students if we're asking other employers to as well.
And I was going to say, could you speak to some of the plans to try to recruit employers to participate as sponsors or whatever
Sure.
the term is?
Well, we're going to tap our business council for sure. We're going to tap NEF. And we actually, and I almost added to Dan's good news, we are blown away by the amount of employers that are coming to Career Motivate. We have more employers than some of our districts, U46 being one of them, that has done this for a long time. And our employers, it's amazing. So please our and join us that day. But we will access all of those networks so that we have enough offerings. We are piloting this year with students, and it's been a little slow, but they're all employed. All of the pilot students are employed, but we know as we engage more of our business partners that they'll want this opportunity for our kids. So we're going to scale it. I don't know how big yet, Charles, but we'll have metrics to back it up.
And my last question, and I'll yield, is are there particular areas of study or areas of interest where, one, you found a lot of success in terms of finding employers, and are there others that you're still looking for?
Well, I don't think we have enough to say in one pathway yet. Very much looking at IT, and we're very much looking at manufacturing. Those are two because we know those are our high need areas of employability. So I don't have enough data to say they've been in one specific pathway yet, but at the end of next year, that would be our goal, is that because then if we know they're in one certain pathway, we want to ensure that students are getting that diploma endorsement and our courses are there and we have the dual credit and the AP in those pathways so that it does differentiate our graduates.
Good, thank you. Again, can't tell you how excited I am about this. It's a great program.
Great.
I saw Amanda.
Also very excited about this. Charles took some of my questions. But how many students are in the pilot right now?
I'm going to look to my high school. I think it's 22. Yeah, I think it's 22 between the two. Good question. I'll have the answer for sure next time.
No worries, thank you. The other question I had, I guess, is I know that as a district, you said that you're looking for different employers, which is amazing, because I was also curious of like how many career tracks this would be accountable to. But if a student were to come to you and say they had an employer, could they like apply and say, hey, I found this employer that'd be willing to sponsor me. Could I use this one to count? Would
Yeah, that's a great question. Absolutely. We would love for them to come with employers. But we also want them to come to an employer that is of their area of interest as well. So we would encourage them to do that. One thing with this course is we have to really educate our employers because our kids are smart. Our kids can do it. And sometimes they're a little reluctant to take a chance on some of our high school kids. But once they get in there and they know that this is successful and they add value to their business or industry, I think we're going to get more employers interested. So this is boots on the ground starting.
We were seeing pretty tremendous growth in internship opportunities for our students during the summer pre-COVID.
Yeah.
And as Jane said, I think of the city of Naperville, who was one skeptical partner initially, but then year after year kept asking for more to come back because they saw the value of having the students with them. So.
Yep.
Christine?
This is more of just a comment. This one excited me because as a student, I do better when I can do something. And so I'm excited that for kids who are interested in a class, but then you kind of get to a point like, why am I sitting in this class? What's the end game here? This will give them, hopefully, like keep them excited about what they're studying, and then having that opportunity to apply it. Like I said, I just know from my experience, let me do something, you know, sitting here at a certain point, just no more fun. So I'm glad this is come up in front of us for consideration.
Great. Donna.
All right, well, that sparked a thought that I had, so thank you. I think that we don't realize the impact that these kinds of hands-on opportunities have for our students. And I know from working with a number of interns this last summer in my work, hearing them say that they've learned more in an internship than they do sitting in, you know, some of our classes. And this is nice because it's a combination of both. It's the blended piece of it. So super excited to see this coming to our students, and so relevant and hands-on. So thank you for your work and dedication.
Any additional questions or comments from the Board of Education with regard to this portion? Okay, I don't see any.
Okay, the final questions regarding Latin.
Questions from the board? Donna.
So I know you went through the course audit process in general for your, you know, how that works. Can you give us a little more hands-on as to like what did that look like in terms of the Latin course? Thanks.
And I'm also going to ask our high school administrators to join us as well. So this has been conversation over the course of the last, as you look at the data, few years, right? Knowing that we have had sections that decrease. So every year that conversation is had at the department level. So we meet every year with our department chairs, and we do that twice a year. We just finished that up in the fall, and then we do it again in the spring. And we look at enrollment, we look at relevancy, we look at, for this purpose, the seal of biliteracy, for example, as well. And we have conversations about things that we need to keep on our radar. And so that is something that we have seen, and you can look at the numbers I think that I shared earlier. North has been declining at a more rapid rate than Naperville Central. And again, this has nothing to do with the educators. Our educators are top notch. You saw that, you heard that tonight from our students. Our educators are wonderful. And so we have those conversations, and we have to look and say, enrollment is one piece. And then we have to look and say, what is the relevancy as well? And we do use our data, whether or not the data we have our college and career counselors also contact. We give them things to contact their post-secondary institutions all the time. And hearing, so sometimes we have to make some decisions because of enrollment, and this is not a spoken language. When we think about our world and classical languages, this is not a spoken language. This is also not one that upon graduation can require or can provide employability for our students like our others can. You have the seal of biliteracy. In our other areas, ASL, they can go and translate. We can do that in our other areas, right? Both verbally and then the written language as well. So we look at those, and we also look at the post-secondary. And post-secondary information that we have received does tell us that it is not as, they absolutely take it, and they absolutely recognize it as a world and classical language, but it does not provide an advantage to our students. So it does not provide the advantage in a medical field. It does not provide the advantage into maybe an engineering or an English area of study as well. It's recognized, absolutely it's recognized. So we have to look, like with any of our programs, at all of those factors, like when we brought social studies courses to you in the past, like we did when we brought speech forward in the past. So we followed that same process with this as we made those recommendations, and knowing that the administration has also had conversations with the teachers themselves of these courses. Do you want to add anything, Central or North?
I did you first last time, so I'll do you first and then you. So Amanda.
What's the fiscal impact of phasing out this course?
Well, there can be a few, right? So when we have to look at space, we have to look at and when I say one of the fiscal is, we have less students. So when we have less students, and this isn't just Latin, it's overall. Our students select, or I'll say vote with their feet, right? And so we look at what they register for, and then we build our schedule from there. And we have to make decisions every year about courses that we don't run, because we may have X amount of students, and we say that's not enough to run this course. So this is not something that doesn't happen to other educators the whole time. Can I give the exact number of what the fiscal is? No, I can't do that right now. I can bring it back to you. But when we think about the totality of high school, and we think about 300 courses that are competing with each other, right? And we only have so many students to fill those seats. And I think this is something that Dr. Holland talked about when we did staffing last year. We have to make decisions, and we make cuts in other areas as well. So we just have to think about some of those responsibilities. Is it that we want to run courses? So when I look at right now, I don't have it in front of me, I did the Latin 3-4 enrollment numbers. Let me pull it up and I'll tell you. Okay, so when I look at the Latin 3-4 numbers at Naperville North, for example, we're running a combination of Latin 3 and Latin 4 with 13 students. So you could think about that, I guess, per pupil if you wanted to. And then I look at the central students in 3 and 4. The combination of that is 28 students. So it would be 2 courses. So that would be something, I think, as a board financially you would consider as you think about those numbers.
Some of the comments brought up, and I do want to just kind of like honor that, is, the conversation or a debate around because of COVID, not being able to advertise this to the 8th graders and let them know what some of the benefits are. Do you think that could it be contributing to some of these lower numbers, post-pandemic? Is that something that could see a turnaround if there was more opportunity to advertise it?
So I wish I had my number of electives off hand. Okay, so I'll use electives. So this is an elective area, right? So we have electives that we have to promote all the time, and we did have 8th grade registration evening, and we had it on Zoom, but we did have those. We also did have counselor conversations with students, and actually we had it pretty robust that year, quite frankly, because that was the first rollout of School Links and our first rollout of our counseling curriculum. So we had very targeted dates and times and things that our counselors and our teachers had to do as they went through the course recommendation process and sequence. So this is not just one elective. We have a host. We have electives. Most of our building is run by electives or elective courses and choice by students. So this would not have any more than any other course during that school year.
And then I just have one more comment, and then we'll lead to a question and I'll yield.
Sure.
I just think it's really interesting that there was such an outpouring for this course, and which says a few things to me. And I think some of the things that stood out to me were components to me that kind of sound like diversity, equity, inclusion. Is there's this core group here that this has been incredibly relevant to them, and they said it's the most important thing for their high school, and so the only place they really felt safe and included. And so taking that away feels really hard, for me, with someone that has that kind of lens and importance. And also the statement in every single email and testimony about how Latin, even though it's not spoken, has truly enriched their education, and with English, with science, with math, and how it's incorporated everywhere. And so that's hard not to kind of take that into consideration, of that it is incredibly relevant. So I guess with the dwindling, so here comes my question, is with the dwindling within, North, but we also have a teacher that's excellent, obviously, in this, is there a way to do a hybrid option of merging both the schools to have, a combined course of Latin for the two schools? Because I know, we can't offer everything everywhere, but, to do something that would be an option to keep that alive for a little bit longer?
Sure, and we do that. And I actually want to give huge kudos to Mrs. Cunningham because our kids absolutely adore her. This is absolutely something that is a program because she's excellent. And the beauty of it is she also teaches other things at Naperville Central. And so we get her, and we get her in homeroom in addition to Latin. Can we combine? We can. What do we find when we combine sometimes? That our kids like to be in their spaces and they like to be in their high schools. And sometimes when we think about the master schedule, especially when students start getting to electives, we don't offer electives at every single period. So sometimes our electives, actually oftentimes, our electives compete with one another. And so most often when we offer something from a student of North and a student from Central to take together, that's done first period. There are other courses, and you think about the planning, the 300 courses we plan at both high schools, that could be a conflict for some of our students, just based on other electives they take. So the scheduling's also a tricky piece. There's many, many variables to this, but can we consider that? We can absolutely, if that is recommended by the Board of Education.
The fewer sections we offer in any given course limits the ability for more and more students to take that, simply because then we're kind of restricted within the schedule. And that often then creates conflicts for students within their schedule. We've been contacted before in other courses that if we can only offer it a single time in the day, just simply because we're combining from both courses or based on the educator's schedule, the educator that's certified in that area. And then so when we do that, it just limits in a course like this where we have 20 students, that's one section. And so we're very limited then, so a student can't say, oh, I can't take it first period, so it must be available third period maybe. Well, no, we can only offer in one section. So it really limits, it's very difficult in the master schedule planning.
And this year, just so you know, Mrs. McMillan, is that we did not have any Latin 1 students at Naperville North. And right now, we have 14 in Latin 2. Some of those will drop off because they may say, oh, I'm going to take my 2 years. And others might not. So those are other considerations, too. Yeah.
Charles.
All right, well, I took some of your questions last time, you took some of mine this time, so now we're even. Couple of things. One, first I want to start off by just acknowledging all the students that came and those who advocated. I continue to be impressed with the caliber of the students that we have, the caliber of the students that we grow in this district. They don't just happen, we grow them, so it's important to recognize that. So kudos to everyone in the room who has had a hand in every single one of the students who spoke this evening. Their arguments were compelling. We just talked about college and career readiness. We just talked about those are the kinds of skills, the ability to advocate for oneself, the ability to stand up in front of a microphone in a room full of people and make a very compelling argument is very important, so we should all be proud of that work. So I'm really excited about the caliber of the students that we grow here and their advocacy. I would also like to piggyback on Amanda's comments, understand the fiscal impact a little bit. So you mentioned that that's something we can get. We'd be curious about that. One of the things that some of the students mentioned that I hadn't considered before, and that really kind of resonated with is, one, the students had talked about how they process information differently and how this language, while not spoken, is one that helps them to process in a different way. And it's one where they may not do well in the Spanish or a Mandarin or another language, or French, but this is a type of a language that they can process a little differently. So from a diversity and inclusion perspective, I think I hadn't thought about it from that standpoint, but I was just thinking about it from the standpoint of how students are processing. So did we look at it through that lens? And I'll ask the other part of the question and then you can answer it. Also, did we evaluate it, in the criteria it says relevancy in and of itself, but then one of the things that came through in the student comments this evening was the relevancy to how it supports in other areas. So how it creates root languages and how it helps them to learn differently in other ways. Did we look at it from the utility of the course and this language through that lens?
Sure. I'll give you a little bit. I'm going to take you on a word study a spin here, right?
Sure.
So last year, we implemented it for the first time, a very targeted word study program that actually starts in kindergarten and it moves on up. And a lot of times when we think about systemic word study and the science of reading, we do very targeted instruction from K-3. What this now does is it really expands that, where in 4 and 5, we actually focus roots and affixes. We do a lot of language now in those where we had not done that in the past. You will also see, and I think some of the conversation or some of the questions earlier were about possibly a course that infuses Latin, because we know that there, especially with literature, right? We're looking right now, we're in the process of revamping our 6-8 literacy curriculum, and that's an area that we're also looking to how do we infuse more of that word study and some of that as well. And now it's different. It's very different than Latin 1, 2, or 3, but being aware and with vocabulary and where does that vocabulary base come from. So those are things that it's kind of like when we removed speech. Speech was a standalone, and we did better when we infused it within all. Now, when we infuse, are kids going to gain the seal of biliteracy from those experiences? No, they will not. Not at all as rigorous as Mrs. Cunningham's class, but we see the importance of it and how it should be embedded, and we're even considering curriculum design in that. So we know, we understand it, but it won't. No, so it won't be as targeted, to answer your question. But it's not non-existent.
Right. So if I could paraphrase what I thought I heard you say, is that what part of the plan would be to infuse some of the concepts that come through in a Latin course earlier on and throughout. You gave the analogy of how in speech it wasn't necessarily a separate class, but how it was incorporated, or some of the concepts were incorporated in different areas. Is that?
Right, study of the Latin language. That's what it would be. Would it be fluency and as deep as Latin sequence? No, absolutely not. So I don't want anyone to think that.
Right.
But it would be that we infuse that study of Latin in the language and how it impacts literature and how it impacts other areas.
And how would we measure whether or not that approach would be yielding the desired results?
I think how we measure everything, right? And I think that it's like there's many variables to that. And I think we could measure it by the amount of kids that would be, the number that would be engaged in that more than what we currently have, right? We don't have that targeted approach. But to measure that, I think we would need to go back also to our achievement data. We could go back into some of the courses that kids are registering in, some of that data. But there's so many variables to that, I don't know if we could get that minute in our metrics.
Okay. I'll yield. Still processing, but I'll yield for now.
Tony.
I just wanted to echo something Amanda and Charles said about validating what the students said. I actually took 4 years of Latin in Naperville Central myself back in the 90s. This was before Mrs. Cunningham's time. But I had that feeling, and I run into classmates now still, and we do talk about the community of it. And there was something about the fact that it was a small group, that we took the 3rd and 4th year together, and that you stuck together for 4 years. So I'm still processing this, but I have to say, it was very personal for me listening to the students, having been through the program myself. I understand there's choices, and I understand, obviously, that we're looking at, when I was there, we didn't have Mandarin, we didn't have ASL, we didn't have lots of the classes that are offered now. But I do think it's important to say to the students, I heard that a lot. I heard what they said, because I've been through the 4 years of Latin in this district myself, so I do appreciate that. So I just wanted to make that comment.
I also want to point out that we have an opportunity for a 4-year for all students now. So when we think about our homeroom was designed for students to be in a cohort with the same peers for 4 years with the same instructor. Mrs. Cunningham has a class like that, which I'm sure they adore her. And so we do have an opportunity. We did not have that before. So when we think about a sense of belonging, our homeroom also provides that, and it should provide that. We built it that way. So that's another and a new, unique opportunity that gain a sense of belonging for all of our students.
It's really, again, another credit to what's being done in the classroom from a relationship standpoint. Content is a part of it too, but it's the relationship standpoint. And there are other models and other ways that our bigger high schools are feeling smaller, and kids are having that sense of belonging, having that opportunity for sense of belonging. In addition to our homerooms, I think about our community resource centers and the opportunities for drop-in and build relationships through other ways. I didn't finish 4 years of Latin. I did 2 of them at St. Charles High School. And again, it is a different culture. I agree. But it's part of that relationship with the adult, between the children and the adult in the classroom, as much as the content.
Joe.
Yeah, I also want to echo what Charles and Amanda said. And like Tony, I didn't go to high school in the district, but I had very similar experience, 4 years of Latin in my high school. And a lot of the comments really resonated with me, and this is a very difficult decision. I'm also interested in kind of understanding the fiscal impact of this. Would not running a section of Latin require a section of something else, another foreign language, to be run, right? What does the course balance kind of look like? Also curious about the timeline. You talked about this, study of Latin, sort of a course. That wouldn't be ready for next year, right?
No, I'm talking about that in 6-8. I'm not talking about in the high school. Right. Could it be? That would be something that would be brought up by the department chairs and their departments. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I agree with the idea that Latin's a very structured, logical language, different way to think about language. And it is very beneficial for really understanding grammar, syntax, kind of language in general. I definitely benefited in those ways. So I guess the other thing I'm curious about is in terms of numbers coming out of COVID, were there other courses that saw kind of similar declines during COVID, and were there, did those undergo a similar audit process?
I will refer. I don't have all those numbers with me. We can. I'm going to go back to your first question, though, because I don't know if we can get you this information. When you said, would it have impact? We wouldn't know that until the course selection process. So we wouldn't know those numbers, where if they would increase or decrease other places, because remember, the students currently will finish their sequence. We will not stop a sequence for our students at all. And so when I look now, I could take the number and say, in Latin 1 right now, there's 21 at Central, none at North. So I would assume we could take that 21 and say, where would they go? What other languages? That number probably wouldn't take another FTE if that's when we think about spreading 21 students.
And it's likely that we've seen similar drops in other courses, I would speculate, simply because I think about Naperville Central, for example. 5 years ago, I think we had about 2,800, 2,850 in terms of kids. Right now, we're about 2,550. And so the fewer number of kids is going to result in fewer kids selecting courses, too. It's about a 300 student difference.
And we also then won't run some courses if they don't have the numbers.
Donna.
So I understand. I asked the question about process to start this, and then I listened to all my colleagues. I guess I'm wondering what takes you from the course audit process, where we just to the point where
as opposed to, I'm sorry, I'm still processing. So
Sure.
what takes you from the course audit process in determining that this is recommended to be removed, as opposed to running the course and allowing students to take the choice and then just choosing not to offer a section? Like what pushes you over the edge from
Sure.
one to the other?
Hard decisions, right?
Yeah,
One, we have to
thank
take the
you.
people out of it.
Yep.
That's the number one, which is hard to do. And so we have to think about, for this, because we've seen patterns, and we do have feedback from post-secondary. We do. And knowing that it's not, when we're one of 6 universities in this state of Illinois that, offer the continuation, we have to make some of those hard decisions that say, is this a course that's still viable for us as a district? Administration is recommending to you that we think it's ready to retire that. How you make that decision is up to you. But we do come and have to sometimes just have those decisions and say, based on what we know about post-secondary, what we know when we think about languages, when we graduate, like I said earlier, is this something viable for kids when we think about continuous employment? We've talked about employability in earlier in the courses. So those, they're not easy, Donna. We don't make these very easy because we know they're emotional, and we know that we have deep connections to the people in our system. But we could continue to add and add and add, but there does become a breaking point.
Yeah. And I think what I want to just say at a very high level from that standpoint, it's not just about the number. Their course audit process looks at more than just the number. Enrollment in this particular course, at least looking at Central's number, have been declining for over 10 years, from 60s down to the 20-ish that are in there now. So it is a pattern of that declining, in addition to the factors that Jane talked about regarding college career workforce readiness.
Thank you.
I'm going to just do a question first because I haven't done one. Okay, so thank you again for all of your data that you've given, and as well, thank you to the many people who come and spoken, both from the community and the students, and we have lots more emails than we have speakers, so we appreciate each one of those, because I think that Mrs. Willard shared, this is emotional, this is really difficult, and the reason it is because of the wealth of teaching that our teachers have given to our students. So that's obvious, right? I wanted to dig in a little tiny bit about your comments about language. So the bilingual event that we just had, that we honored, I know that this does offer the seal of biliteracy. So you're not talking about it not offering the seal of biliteracy. You're talking about the additional benefits of a spoken language in terms of looking at the more global world and offering for our students. Could you talk a little bit more about, how those two weigh for you as to what our language offerings are? Because I have to say, I am so impressed with our students and their language capabilities. Listening, there was student panels that were part of the dual language event, and just listening to the vocabulary and the clear fluency of our students is fantastic. So I think that there are other benefits of Latin beyond that. I'm not suggesting that by any means. Certainly, even though it's not spoken, it does have that origin level. But could you talk a little bit more from your perspective as to what you're hoping for our students in terms of biliteracy, both language-wise and with regard to sort of that being a part of the global citizen?
And I want to remind the board too, this has been a effort with Naperville Central and Naperville North administration, along with myself as well. So I'm just a spokesperson with them. But absolutely. So when we think about global citizenship and we think about industry trends and economy and our kids being competitive, and we think about the world and classical languages that when they are competitive and when they have the seal of biliteracy and they can speak, they can write, they can interpret another language other than English, that does increase their opportunities post-secondary 100%. And so when we think about, and I'll give you an example of even for us, when we look at applications that come in, we want applicants that are fluent in another language. That helps us, that helps our organization. So when we think about our dual language, or we think about Mandarin, and Mandarin also does run similar numbers. But when we know that when we look at some of the feedback from our post-secondary partners, and when we look at global employability, that is a language that is a return on your investment. It absolutely is, because they can access it, they can use it, and they can become global with that. And so I don't know if I answered your question. I don't know, Marion, if you would like to add to that. Okay.
No, I think I am sympathetic to almost that responsibility that we have to our students, and that our students have, that we all have to the world, in terms of connection. I do think it does further connections to have the ability to connect with language as well. There were many things that were highlighted in the emails and the conversation from students, such as, and Charles was getting at it in his question, but that origins of language portion and that historical context. I do think Latin does have strengths there that benefit us as we go forward and as we learn other languages, and as we do, become global citizens and converse with others in their languages, et cetera, and the languages that we have as well. But I'm wondering, has there been consideration to the development of a course that would contain some of those origins of language, historical context types of things, and then, help students, gain a easier entry into a language that is spoken? Like, have we thought about that because when you've shared your numbers, the Latin 1 numbers are the highest, not at North, but the Latin, even at Central, it's those higher years where it seems as if it's really declining. But Latin, I think, was mentioned in many of our students' communications as something that benefits them as they begin another language. So I'm wondering if there has been some thought to, like, a one-year course that would be.
Absolutely, that could be. And just so everyone is, none of us are arguing that we do not find value in Latin. Absolutely. We heard it, we know it, but there are times, like I said, we can continue to add and think about future courses. But so I just want to, absolutely.
Part of our responsibility as administration, according to board policy, is to go through this process. And to look at our curriculum, our programs of study, what we're offering, and to audit them in many ways, not only from the financial impact, the course enrollment standpoint, but its relevancy, its connection to best practice, next steps, post-secondary work. And that's what this process does. When you think about, kind of where we're at, I heard it also. The voice of the student today was really pretty powerful in terms of their relationship with their educator, what they take from it, their sense of belonging. That was impactful. That said, we are committing resources to a course that we've seen significant decline over the past 10 years, to where at one of our high schools it's not even running. Okay, and so we have a responsibility to bring that to you. And as we look at not only competing priorities, not just from a financial standpoint, but from a programmatic standpoint, we need to bring to you the data and the information that you can direct us. We talked about, again, our educator, the relationship she's created with the kids is powerful. As Mrs. Willard said, we're lucky to have her, and we're lucky to continue to have her to serve in other areas. So I feel good about that. I feel good about changes we've made, high school programmatically, in terms of building a sense of belonging and focus on student voice and building those relationships. And so, I mean, as Jane said, this is not a criticism necessarily of Latin. I know it feels like it and sounds like it to those who have experienced Latin, but as you consider and deliberate over these competing priorities and interests, we need your guidance. We are recommending to you, through our standard course audit process that includes the high school instructional leadership and their teams, including their instructional coordinators, department chairs, that we believe we can remove this without a negative impact academically to our students in a post-secondary world. And so if the board says this is an important priority for us, we'll make it work. Reminder, as we've talked about all of those things, they're going to have implications on master scheduling and other selections. It just, again, it makes the situation difficult, so.
And then going back to also what you said about the courses, that would be something absolutely the buildings can come and bring to us. And that's done through our conversations with them in November and with them in February, and probably monthly meetings with our teachers. So I'm going to go back kind of to the math, right? A couple years ago, we sat and removed, and that was, not everyone loved that, right? And I think we've brought a great course forward because we really had them sit and say, what can it be? I'm so excited about that about what it will be if you recommend that.
Thank you. Okay, you had another one.
So a couple of things. One, you mentioned the course audit process, and it seems like there were, 4 components to it? Learning standards, student interest, industry trends, and post-secondary preparation. Could you speak a little bit to the weighting of how each of those, or is it kind of just a full balance?
We don't really weight those. We also look at leverage. So there are a couple other things we look at too. And in the sequence, since this is a sequence that the next level of learning progresses, but that's where for this is the relevance piece as well. So we don't weight them differently. We weight them pretty similarly, but we go through, we sit down and have those conversations. Like Dan said, this is something that, by board policy says that this is what we need to engage in. And we do need to engage in this, especially when we think about 300 plus courses and actually future courses that we would like to also bring forward, knowing that the world is ever changing.
Yeah, I think that's an important point to make as we continue to be thinking about being future-driven as opposed to just continuing to move forward doing the things that we've been doing. We really want to think about what's the future of education, like what are the future opportunities our students need to have in order to be prepared to be successful. And so I think Jane's right, especially as we think about the implementation of our college career readiness, our post-secondary workforce readiness, we want to bring new things. We've seen changes in instructional strategies. We've seen changes in technology and to be able to use technology in just various areas in workforce demand and what we need to prepare for the workforce. I anticipate in the next several years we'll be seeing more courses coming forward. And that, again, makes this audit process such a valuable tool for us because we can't just continue to keep adding things because it's just not doable.
Because then we'll get to a point where we won't run anything because our numbers will be so low.
Right. So,
I see Donna and then Christine.
So I heard a request from the educator, from the students, and again, I think everyone said thank you.
Yeah.
And I appreciate all the things that we heard and the lots of, ideas that it gave us to process. But what I'm hearing, if I'm not mistaken, like if you could just make sure I'm on the right page here, Jane. What I'm hearing is that there was a request to wait a year to see if the numbers would come up post-COVID. But what I'm hearing is that with the 4 steps to this audit process, and the fact that they're not weighted, the student interest is just a small portion of it, and the decisions being driven by these other 3 aspects. Probably.
It is.
Okay.
Yeah, a little bit. And the student interest comes from our enrollment.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So
We
even if that were to go up, we still have the other 3 components of the process that would not change.
Yep. Unless the board told us otherwise. Yep.
Okay.
Christine, did you have your hand? Okay.
This is really just a comment. Each of us, and I want to make sure I do tell the students, whether it was written comment or spoken comment tonight, I'm impressed, as Charles said. I didn't have those skills when I was your age, I'll be honest with you. It takes a lot to write or to speak in front of a public body, or in front of just the community like this. I can't come up with a question right now, really, because the listening has been beneficial in terms of even listening to my fellow board members. But I can appreciate where administration is at because, you're taking in all these different data points and you have to come up with a recommendation. And that's where I find myself, I'm swimming with all these thoughts from everybody. But I didn't want it to seem like I didn't have a thought. It's just I'm trying to put all those data points together. And I think this is a good example of getting more information, and I appreciate what you're going to find out for us. And I'm very appreciative that we're not taking action tonight. This is one of those times another 2 weeks is going to be beneficial. So thank you again, and thank you to our students and to Mrs. Cunningham for their advocacy also.
Okay, I think I do not see any more questions. So we have, if you have additional questions, if something comes to mind, please do send them to our administration and they'll provide those in the next 2 weeks. Okay, so we have finished the discussion without action portion of our agenda. Now we will move on to item 9, discussion with action, and we'll start with item 9.01, resolutions delegate.
Earlier this evening, the board discussed the proposed resolutions, modifications to resolutions to be considered at the joint annual conference held later in November, on November 19th. And as a member of the association, the Illinois Association of School Boards, you are able to appoint a delegate to represent the Board of Education on its behalf for the delegate assembly. And so you'll need to nominate and take action on approving a delegate.
Okay, thank you for that. So thoughts from the board as to your thoughts about who would be the right delegate. I know originally we probably thought it might have been Joe because of the resolution, but now that we're not going to go forward with the resolution, we may do that next year. Perhaps that would be something that would be better for you to be a delegate maybe next year, I'm thinking. But who would like to be the delegate, or has everyone had an opportunity to be the delegate at least once? Okay, Donna.
So I've been the delegate once, but I believe it was like 9 years ago. So I would like to do it again at some point. But if somebody else has a strong rationale or reason, like I would have deferred, obviously. But I think you probably want to do it with your resolution as opposed, yeah.
And I was a delegate 2 years ago, so I think it's better for somebody else to, who hasn't done it and kind of
And I don't know if it was 9 years ago, but it was 8 or 9. It was a long time ago.
Roundabout.
I have not, but I'm not going. I'm unable to make it this year, so.
Yeah. So I think if, Charles.
So I served, my first year on the board, I served as a delegate.
Oh, you did?
I
Okay.
think. Yeah, so I did have
Yeah.
the opportunity to do it. Wasn't sure if anyone was going to volunteer to do it. I'd be more than happy to do it, but if Donna has an interest, more than happy to yield to her taking a second turn.
Well, we're really appreciative of the hard work of the delegate, because the delegate does miss a lot of the conference. Like, it's a significant time commitment and their preparation, and it's a great process. And we thank Joe for having done it just 2 years ago and then coming up with another resolution, being willing to do it again with the resolution. But in my opinion, if you would like to do it again, I've done it before. I think everybody has except for Tony, who isn't going to attend. So.
Somebody needs to nominate.
So you're going to get a motion? You need a motion?
I would welcome a motion.
And there we go. I nominate Donna to be our resolutions delegate at IASB.
Second. A motion and a second are heard. Please call the roll, Mrs. Patton.
McMillan.
Aye.
Fitzgerald.
Aye.
Gerke.
Aye.
Wanke.
Aye.
Casey.
Aye.
Kush.
Absolutely.
Kosminski.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. So Donna will be our delegate. Thank you for serving. All right, so we'll move on to item 10, old business. We do not have any old business. So we'll move to item 11, new business. We do not have any new business. So we'll move to item 12, upcoming events. And we will begin with item 12.01, schedule of events.
Not on this calendar. But however, I would like to remind the community that October 6th and 7th, Thursday and Friday this week, are no school for student days. Institute Day and parent conferences on the 6th, and parent-teacher conferences on the 7th. Our next Board of Education meeting is Monday, October 17th.
Great, thank you. Good reminder. Okay, so with that being said, we'll move to item 13, adjournment, and we'll start with item 13.01, motion to adjourn. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second or heard. Please call the roll, Mrs. Patton.
Cush.
Aye.
McMillan.
Aye.
Fitzgerald.
Aye.
Wanke.
Aye.
Casey.
Aye.
Kuzminski.
Aye.
Gerke.
Aye.
The motion passes. We are adjourned. Good night, everyone.